In this video, I'll be looking at Chris Watt's linguistic strategies and defense mechanisms. This involves looking at syntax and word choice, along with concepts such as distancing language, indirect language, and narrative analysis. According to some FBI profilers, Chris is a malignant narcissist. Malignant narcissists don't care about the pain of others. Many times they take pleasure in it. They'll do whatever it takes to prevent themselves from pain or inconvenience. They're overly concerned with their appearance and they lack empathy for others. So how should you frame questions to a possible narcissist? You should make them feel special and even superior. Praise is the one thing you can use to try to control them. With this in mind, let's listen to the introduction of this prison interview. The male investigator Graham's previous interview with Chris is the starting point for his line of questions.
I don't know if you remember, but one of the last things you told me was, "Hey Graham, I'm sorry that I started lying to you."
Graham starts with involving Chris as he articulates an I and a you, a relationship or a pretend relationship between the two of them.
And that stuck with me for the last couple months. It's been ringing in my head, right?
Graham points to Chris having made an impact on him, and his use of right forms a question with an inbuilt preference for agreement, and in this case also points to said relationship between him and Chris.
I've never ever worked a case like this where someone told me that, ever.
Using repetitive language, Graham emphasizes what's important for him to get across, that Chris is special. He makes this point even stronger by putting his experience in narrative form.
And so as I walked away, I thought, Chris is different.
Thereby showing Chris that he already thought of it back then, and that this is not just made up for the occasion. He's thus supporting the alleged fact that Chris has made an impact on him. Also notice that Graham's little recollection of events is used to indirectly remind Chris not to lie to him again.
Chris is a little bit unique in that regard.
Graham cleverly modifies or minimizes the adjective unique twice with a little bit and in that regard. Without this modification, Graham's strategy might have been too obvious. Overall, Graham's statements form a so-called complex preface. A preface consists of statements that lead up to the question itself, and as we've just seen, it always serves a purpose. In the following, notice how late the benefits for the investigators appear compared to the benefits for Chris. How Chris's well-being appears to be the first and foremost purpose of this interview, which, of course, is not the case.
I hope that when we're done, you'll feel better. I hope it'll be therapeutic. We're going to talk about, obviously, what happened with your family, and so that's going to be hard to talk about. I appreciate anything you can tell me about it. If you need to take time out, if you need to get a tissue, that's fine, right? I think it'll be very good for you. It'll be good for us.
Graham continues stroking Chris's ego by mentioning the amount of interest that Chris has sparked.
We were aware that you were getting a lot of letters, a lot of interest, and then us personally as law enforcement, we got so many people who claim to have known you, claim to have been with you, dated you, slept with you.
In the following, Chris is asked to tell about the time he spent with Nichol.
Tell us about the time you spent with her.
Well, I mean, it felt like it was, I think, like when you said, like, I was more like a shy guy, it's kind of like I've never, like, been pursued by anybody before.
We notice that Chris doesn't answer directly. What's most important to him, obviously, is to establish who he considers himself to be. He does this through parroting the words of the interviewer. Graham has previously characterized Chris as a shy guy. With parroting, Chris can propose that he's attending to the question in detail and is thus appropriately responsive to the issues that it raises. Chris's focus is obviously himself and how Nichol made him feel. Chris now turns his attention to Shanann, even though he was asked to tell about his time with Nichol. So Shanann is clearly on his mind, but not in a good way. Notice how he portrays Shanann in a slightly negative light here, while he himself comes across as a victim in their marriage.
By anybody before, it's kind of like I was the one, trying to pursue, because like when me and Shanann met, it was like, she was always like pushing me away, kind of like,
She was sick for a while, right?
Oh yeah, she had just got diagnosed with lupus, and she was on like a bunch of different medications and stuff, and it was like, I guess I wasn't her type. And
you weren't her type?
I wasn't her type.
Okay.
Like she told me like when she first, because we had met.
She told you that?
Yeah.
You're not my type.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
Chris then goes on remembering the first time he met Shanann. His memories are put in narrative form. A narrative is a situated representation of a series of related events. A leads to B, B leads to C, back to A, and so on. Within narrative analysis, Chris's initial description that we just heard is called the summary. It summarizes the narrative's main theme, that he was always pursuing her. Chris then proceeds with the orientation and the action parts of the narrative. The orientation presents time, place, and characters, while the action presents the conflict itself, or the meat of the story. Listen to this.
It was like, when we first met, like, it was at a movie theater. My cousin's ex-wife set us up.
You were dressed like shit, weren't you?
I
think that's what you told me.
Yeah, I didn't know, like, that.
They didn't have any games?
So she was fancy and he was in like shorts and tennis shoes or something, right?
Shoes and, like, I should have known the doorman, was in a suit. And I was just like, this isn't good. And like
Was it at the theater?
It was a fancy theater, right?
It was
Kinda?
in Charlotte. It was called the Epicenter, and apparently they give you like champagne and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, this is a fancy date night theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he
Movie
came.
theater.
I think he came like he was going to a
Like I was
Cinemax,
Like
I was going to a bonfire
like a
or something.
AMC.
Like a play theater?
No, it was like you we
Movie
just watched
theater?
a normal movie, but it was like you can like drink champagne and like
Yeah.
have like a Jack and Coke inside the theater and just
Yeah.
sit there and just whatever. But like yeah, it's when she first saw me, she was like, I should probably just turn and talk to the bartender a little more. Like, no, I'm not here to meet.
We should pay attention to his delivery of this information, his carefree tone of voice, along with his stream of consciousness-like way of narrating, suggest a lack of guilt and remorse. Chris is quick to buy into the informal conversation that the investigators are setting up through aligning laughter and encouraging responses. He even impersonates Shanann. At this point, he doesn't apply distancing language, so this information seems to be rather uncontroversial for him. This changes later on. In the following, we hear the evaluation and the coda of his narrative. The purpose of the evaluation is to bring the audience back to the present moment by repeating the summary. Chris does this here.
Yeah, I was always pursuing her,
The coda ends the narrative to make way for a new one.
and then just like finally I grew onto her. Like
Narratives like we see in movies or song lyrics are an effective tool for a despised person like Chris, because they're designed to create a sense of identification between the audience and the narrator. It's a way of getting close to the narrator's thoughts. Narratives also create emotional reactions: laughter, sadness, joy, anger, and so on. We've already heard laughter. A point to remember: the narrator is like a director and has the power over the characters in a narrative. Therefore, we need to pay attention to who's depicted as the hero or helper and who's depicted as the obstacle or enemy, because these depictions are always closely tied to the main theme of the narrative. In this case, that Chris was the one pursuing her, and ultimately that he was unhappy in his marriage.
I would always like with her medications and stuff, I would always she had like 8 bottles of medications, so I would always get like her day and nights and kind of like put them all in that little, flip open
Pill box.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, and I would always, be around her. I even went to her colonoscopy with her. And she said after that she knew that was like kind of a keeper. It's like, who goes to a colonoscopy after 3 months with somebody?
Right.
It's a little soon.
Well, she asked if she needed a ride. I'm like, yeah. She's like, you want to go colonoscopy with me? I'm like, sure, why not? Like, I even sat with her while she drank that nasty stuff all day.
Yeah.
Oh. Where she's in the bathroom
That's
all
a good
day.
test.
that clear stuff that doesn't really taste clear.
Chris depicts himself as someone who made sacrifices for Shanann, and this depiction is sensitive to him because he uses the adverb even twice in describing how he allegedly helped Shanann. Even provides additional details, referring to something unexpected or extreme even. The interesting part is that he emphasizes and thus interprets these actions himself, completely unprovoked. The audience doesn't get to judge. Chris makes the judgments for us. His rhetorical question:
It's like, who goes to a colonoscopy after 3 months with somebody.
Is also interesting in this regard. Rhetorical questions are indirect and polite ways of making judgments. Chris implies that no one would do what he did for Shanann, but instead of saying that, he says it in form of a question, thus making it sound less direct, less self-glorifying. We also make an eerie observation. Notice the negative words and phrases he associates with Shanann. These imply disgust with her.
Is that why she drank that nasty stuff all day? That clear stuff that doesn't really taste clear?
Furthermore, there's his need to even mention the colonoscopy, a degrading act for the one receiving it. Plus his inappropriate laughter.
Is that why she drank that nasty stuff all day?
Oh.
There's an element of ridicule in Chris's language. Ridicule could be the result of him trying to disassociate from his memory, or it could be a personality trait, or both.
So then with Nikki, was it different?
It just seemed like I was more in control, it seemed like, and that never happened. Like she'd actually like asked me like my opinion on a lot of things, and just like what I wanted to do, and just kind of like, okay.
That was new, wasn't it?
Very new.
Oh, that's fascinating to me.
Shanann is put in the role of someone who restricted Chris. Chris does this indirectly without mentioning Shanann's name. He's close to saying her name, but performs self-repair instead.
And that never happened. Like she'd actually...
Self-repair often occurs when a person feels that what they were about to say was too direct, too honest. Chris's use of the word actually means that he's comparing two thoughts at the same time. We don't explicitly get to hear the other thought, but by inference we can figure out that he's comparing Nichol to Shanann.
So that was different, and I think she wanted to go to the car museum, Shelby Museum in Boulder. I've never been there, and
that's right up your alley.
I was just like, that was awesome, just to walk around cars for like an hour or so, and then drag race in Vandermeer.
Okay.
And I haven't been to a drag race since 2008. And that was in Charlotte.
Okay.
Like they have a 4-lane drag strip over there. And it's like the NHRA, the Top Fuel, fun car stuff. Like me and my dad used to grow up. Go there like all the time. And then like went camping in Sand Dunes National Park. Mm-hmm. And I'd never been camping. I always wanted to do it. Thought it was she'd done it like countless times.
Oh really? Okay. She's outdoorsy.
When two people are involved in the description, Shanann and Nichol, all the positive things that Chris attributes to one of them, in this case Nichol, are by definition lacking in the other. It's an effective, indirect way of articulating strong judgments. I always wanted to do it speaks very strongly to the restrictions that Shanann allegedly put on him.
I didn't think. It seemed like it was like a blinder that was in my face.
Oh.
And it just, like every time I look back on it, like I have pictures of my wife and kids and myself, and like every night, or every morning, every night, I just, talk to them, say like.
Previously, I mentioned that Chris didn't distance himself from Shanann when he was talking about how he wasn't her type. But now when Graham asks how Chris felt about being with Nichol, Chris applies distancing language. Chris says, my wife and my kids. He doesn't say their names, and he doesn't even say my daughters, it's just kids. Also notice the grammar here. Chris says it was like a blinder that was in my face. Linguistically, the blinder is in Chris's way. He's not making it sound like a choice he made. The blinder is the subject. On a word level, Chris is freeing himself from responsibility here. We learn the power and oftentimes necessity of distancing language, because right after this, Chris mentions the name of one of his daughters and immediately starts sobbing.
I have like this book I used to read for CC, and I remember that book, so I read that to them like every night. And like there's some scripture and stuff that I read to them, so I just try to think back. Like I wish this never happened. And just like I wish that blinder wasn't on my head, wasn't in my eyes. That would have seen what was going on. Like I was having. Everybody said, "Oh, you're just out there having fun while your kids, or kids and wife are on vacation." I'm just like, no, it wasn't like that. But it seemed like that's what it looked like when you're going, you're going to camping, going to drag race, going all this other stuff that you have fun doing, but you're with somebody else. It's not your family. It just didn't seem right.
He He's talking about the blinder as a separate entity, rather than as his own will, his own decisions. We also hear a switch of pronoun, from the personal I to the more distant you. This switch is significant because pronouns are largely intuitive. Therefore, they reveal a lot about the subject's way of thinking. When Chris is using you instead of I, he's generalizing his experience and avoids standing alone, avoids taking full responsibility. This linguistic defense mechanism becomes very obvious when Chris says this a minute later.
You're not the type of guy to take control sometimes when you need to.
Yeah,
It seems like that's just what happened.
Yeah, I didn't take control of this situation. It was just like the situation controlled me.
Right, it just happened. No, I get that, man. I'm somewhat passive myself, and it's like, you know, there's situations where I'm like, well, why did I let that keep going?
As we've learned from this video, the subject reveals what they really think and feel without directly saying it. This is an important point.